Hey everyone, it's late here and I look kind of bad. My hair is a mess and I look very tired, but there's something that I've been wanting to talk about and I think now is kind of a good time to do it. A lot of times throughout the course of doing this work, and I've been doing this work for nearly 10 years, I've had people come to me and they feel either conflicted with what I do because of religious beliefs that they've held or they've been taught, or there's a fear of it. Um, and so that is just something that I wanted to address. As as someone who considers himself to be spiritual, meaning that I have a connection with the divine, I understand that I come from that space, that divineness, um, but doesn't necessarily prescribe to organized religion. I feel very confidently in what I do and feel very passionately about what I do. And I always think it's very funny when people come up to me, and one of the questions that I get a lot is, do you believe in God? As if somehow by being a medium and a psychic, that sort of throws out the possibility that I could believe in God. That being said, I do believe in an intelligent source or a universal intelligence. Um, I don't claim to understand anything about that intelligence or its wills or its wants. To me, that seems arrogant. But I also think that it boils down to vernacular, whether I do believe or whether I don't believe. You know, what religion might call God, Native Americans might call creator, Buddhists might call the Buddha consciousness or enlightenment, or that scientists might call a morphogenetic field that's measurable. To me, it doesn't matter the words that's used. It is this force, it is this source that we stem from, and I do believe in that, and I do believe that I am a part of that, and that I am not separate from that. Um, I personally prefer the term source or creator just because it doesn't seem to have a lot of the dogmatic connotations that religion has. Um, but that's neither here nor there. God is a theological debate. That's not the subject of this YouTube video. What I am wanting to talk about and address for those who do come from a religious place and either have hesitations or reservations because of that, I want to talk about psychics in the Bible. I've been told many different times, especially by Christians over the years, that what I do is wrong. And I simply don't believe that. And in my own personal search to understand that, being raised in the Pentecostal church, 3 times a week, tent revivals, the whole 9 yards, and my own personal research into the Bible, I found nothing to come to the conclusion that what I do as a psychic and what I do as a medium is wrong in any sort of way. One of the things that I get quoted a lot is actually from Leviticus chapter 20, verse 27. And there are different verses like this throughout the book of Leviticus, but basically it says, "A man who is a medium or a sorcerer or fortune teller shall surely be put to death. They shall be stoned with stones, and their blood shall be upon them." So, um, yeah, I mean, it could sort of seem like it does indeed kind of speak out against what I do, but I want to talk about the Bible and that verse in particular. One of the things that I want to address with that is that the Bible itself has been written and retranslated. And in my search for trying to rectify that verse and my personal stance and opinion, one of the things that I found is that it was written in Hebrew and it was translated into Greek and then into Latin and then from Latin to English. And this is what the modern day King James Version uh, Bible that was developed in the year 1611 stems from. So it's gone from translation to translation to translation. And in the translation process, the word medium that is used in today's Bible, um, which I think it's interesting that there are over 3,000 versions of the modern day Bible, but the word medium that was used, the original word that was used, that was sort of changed around in translation, was not medium but necromancer. Necromancy and mediumship are two very, very different things, but in that that biblical passage, they're somewhat confused. Necromancy is the control of dead, or the manipulation of dead using sorcery. Mediumship is simply acting as a middleman or a conduit for those who are no longer in a physical body to speak um, from the afterlife. So there is a big distinction between that. The other thing, too, is that in the Bible, when you look at what I do, I think, again, it boils down to vernacular. What we might call a psychic in today's world uh, may have been what they talked about as prophecy um, in biblical times. One of the reasons for this, we think of a psychic. They see, they hear, and they feel, also known as clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, or empathy. But biblically, when we look at all of these experiences with the prophets, what made prophets prophets were the fact that they had visions, heard voices, and could sense and discern spirits. And they were not seen as sorcerers or fortune tellers. They were actually held in a very high regard, and they were sort of held in the same sort of office, spiritual office, as the priest of the time. And so, one thing that I thought was very interesting was that in the Old Testament, there are over 500 references to seers and prophets, modern day psychics, and most of them were all positive. The other thing was that 18 out of 39 books in the Old Testament are dedicated to the prophets and their stories and their role in biblical history. The other thing is that the Old Testament makes it very clear that fortune tellers and prophets are not the same thing at all. Um, as I said, they were highly revered. In Leviticus chapter 19, verse 26 and 31, and also chapter 20, verse 6, basically what it is speaking against is not going to a psychic or a medium or a fortune teller. It's putting your faith in them instead of putting your faith in God. And as a medium, as an intuitive, as a psychic, when people come to me, I am helping to give them direction, but I am also helping to give them information and tools to empower themselves, to take control and responsibility for their own life. And as someone who's been teaching psychic development for several years, for me, one of the messages that I'm constantly trying to impart to people is to go to your own source. You can access spirit, you can access God, you can access your intuition on your own. You don't need someone like me to be able to do that. I am more than happy to assist you if you come to me, but I'm not trying to make you dependent on me when you can go right to the source of intuition. Um, but all of that being said, we don't. We don't prescribe to the Old Testament anymore. Most Christians believe that after Christ, we go by the New Testament and the teachings of the New Testament. Um, in the New Testament, in the book of Corinthians, I think it's interesting too that they talk about the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And to me, this is again where it boils down to vernacular with psychics and maybe what was called prophecy in biblical times, because there is the gift of prophecy. There is also the gift of discernment, um, and really that's no different than what I do today. Now, that being said, I do not call myself a prophet. I would not call myself a prophet. To me, that seems arrogant. That seems high and mighty, and that's not what I'm about. I'm simply illustrating that the word psychic didn't exist back then. The word, medium did not exist back then. We're just trying to find labels that fits these experiences. When you look at Christ, he spoke to the dead, he healed the sick, he had visions, he had auditory experiences that came from God or that came from Source. The same things that these prophets were describing is what, or very, very similar to what modern day mediums and clairvoyants, genuine mediums and clairvoyants, how their abilities and how our abilities work as psychics. One thing, too, in Corinthians, Paul, who is formerly known as Saul in the Bible, he speaks of the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and Christ says that we all have these gifts of the Holy Spirit, and that includes discernment, and prophecy. Um, and that's in 1 Corinthians 12. There is nowhere in Corinthians that when discussing these spiritual gifts or the gifts of the Holy Spirit says that there's no reference to evil. There's no reference to Satan. If you ever spoke to anyone that ever came to me for a session, I think that you would hear them say that their experiences are based in love and were very healing. And that's my intention when I work with people, whether it's connecting with a loved one who's passed or giving a psychic read for things that might be going on in their life experience. But I always try to approach it from a place of love, and healing is always my intention with that. Um, is it evil? Is it Satan? Is it the devil when you come to me and you're able to connect with a loved one who's passed and maybe work through some grief that you've been holding on to and leave that day feeling lighter? I don't think so. Is it the devil when a mother who's lost a child comes to me and is able to hear from their child one last time and get really beautiful closure and validation that that child is happy and at peace? I don't think the devil has anything to do with that. I don't think Satan has anything to do with that. Um, the supernatural is natural. The paranormal is normal. It's as someone who identifies as a soul, it is not abnormal, creepy, weird, evil to me that we can remain connected to other souls, whether they are in a physical body or not in a physical body. Um, there are multiple passages in the Bible um, that that touch on these gifts of the Holy Spirit, that touch on prophecy, that touch on prophets, that touch on visions, that touch on communicating with angels and spirits from God and messengers. And it just seems silly to me that back in those biblical days that it was something that was accepted and respected, and today it is something that is feared and seen as evil. Um, and so to you, that is just my perspective. That is my interpretation of things. And I have done my own research, both with books and in the Bible itself. But don't take what I say for face value. I encourage you to do your own research, come to your own conclusions, and if you're that curious, have a session, find out a little bit more. It doesn't have to be with me. It can be with anyone. You can have a session. There are lots of people who do this work, and as much as there are a lot of people out there who are charlatans and con artists, there are some really compassionate, authentic psychics and mediums and readers out there that I think could validate some things for you and really kind of help appease those fears. So that is what I felt compelled to talk about, the things that I felt compelled to bring up. Um, if you have any other information, whether it be biblical research, historical research, or anything of that nature that you think I would be interested, I'm also very open to hearing that too. And I think that's pretty much all that I have to say as that's concerned. I just hope that you find your own truth.